Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our weekly press conference on the status of Delaware's response to the COVID-19 pandemic here in our state. I apologize for the delay in getting started. I'm joined today by two others in state government who are doing a tremendous job for us and for the citizens of our state to talk both about elections, which are issues have come up, particularly elections that will be held under the COVID-19 pandemic conditions, and we want everyone who's eligible to vote and to vote safely. We have a vote by mail legislation that passed the legislature recently just for the elections this year, both the primary election and the general election in November. And Anthony Albence, our Commissioner of Elections, is here to talk about that. I've tried to stay out of the discussions around election procedures during this pandemic, given that my election is up in November as well, and don't want to create any perception that I'm trying to influence the process. My staff has been working with the Attorney General on those issues as we've worked through election issues, mostly that affected the individual town elections that occurred over the last several months, and school board elections as well, and then of course the vote by mail procedures that have been established by the General Assembly and are being implemented by the Department of Elections. We're also joined by Damian DeStefano, who's the Director of the Division of Small Business, really a very important job during this pandemic time as they seek to assist businesses across our state, small and large, to follow the restrictions to make sure that we have a healthy community and a healthy economy, really helping us to have the conversations with individual businesses, large and small, to enable them to operate and to get revenue and to stay afloat during this very challenging and difficult time. And he and his team have been doing a very good job at that. He will talk about an announcement today with additional support for small businesses in our state to help them during, again, this difficult time. With respect to schools, we did announce a couple weeks ago the criteria that we've established for the reopening of schools across our state. The individual school districts and school boards have been working on their individual plans for our yellow stage, scenario number 2, if you will, which allows a hybrid mix of in-person instruction as well as remote learning. Many of the districts have chosen to go to remote learning to start with an eye towards reopening as we move through the fall to provide a level of confidence and trust about the safety of the conditions in the schools for students, for teachers, staff, and for parents alike. A number of other districts have developed hybrid plans where they have a mix of in-person instruction, mostly geared towards elementary school age children, but not exclusively. Partial attendance during the week with a mix of in-person instruction and remote instruction in a virtual kind of way. The districts have been doing a nice job in improving the availability of technology for their students and families and connectivity that would enable that virtual instruction to take place. On the private school sector, many, if not most, of the private schools have decided to go in a mix, a hybrid mix of in-person instruction and remote learning, giving parents and families the choice of selecting one or the other. I know the Catholic schools have decided to do that with limitations as provided by the Division of Public Health with respect to the spacing of desks and students and the use of facilities, the movement of students to and from classrooms, the configuration of desks in a classroom, and just following all the guidelines and restrictions there. Different private schools and charters have again selected a mix from complete remote virtual learning to a mix of in-person instruction and remote. So as we move through the fall, I will be encouraging more and more in-person instruction, particularly for students who need it the most, the younger children learning to read, as well as children with special challenges and from disadvantaged backgrounds, working together, I think, to build and develop the trust with teachers and staff and parents. We'll be able to get to a place where we're giving the students the opportunity to learn that they really need. Students missed several months of learning last spring as we closed schools, and there were limited opportunities over the summer for summer school, and so it's really important to make sure that we get children back in classrooms as quickly as possible. And as we think about the restrictions and our public health guidance, and by the way, Public Health has provided each of the school districts with a liaison with the department working through restrictions and guidance for safe instruction in person. And we appreciate each of those liaisons and the work that they are doing. And we look forward again to moving through that reopening process. And so our focus with respect to the phasing of the reopening on the economic side is in part based on our objective of getting more children back in school, and that requires improving conditions and the improving health of our community. You'll remember several months back that the guidance that we received from the Centers for Disease Control were continuous health improvement over 14-day extended periods of time. Then we moved from one phase to the next. And we've kind of flattened out over the last month or so with little blips here and there. So we continue to need to push those curves down to get lower percent positive in the testing. We've really ramped up testing across our state, and to reduce the number of new positive cases on a day-to-day basis. As we analyze the situation and the feedback that we're getting from our public health officials as they go out and visit business establishments across our state, it mostly comes down to compliance. Compliance with requirements for wearing a mask. Really a simple thing that pays off in a big way in terms of our children and getting people back to work and businesses more reopening. Social distancing, of course, appropriate hygiene. Increasingly, I do see more vigilance with respect to mask wearing for people in public. Again, really a small sacrifice given the huge sacrifices that businesses, in particular, restaurants and bars and businesses where folks congregate, our sports, all of that, that we can't have in a normal way because of the presence of the COVID virus and the risk that it poses, particularly for vulnerable populations in our state. So we continue to look forward towards school reopening, working hard on that, working in cooperation with our school districts, with our teachers and staff, through the Division of Public Health, with the business sector, particularly those businesses that have sacrificed the most with respect to the elections, the primary election that we have coming up in several weeks in September, and the general election in November, to make sure that as many people that as possible can vote and vote safely without exposing themselves to this deadly virus, particularly those that are vulnerable populations. So we appreciate media which have joined us today here in person and those that have submitted questions in advance. I also want to thank everyone for joining us on Facebook Live and following from a week-to-week basis. I get lots of questions as I travel around our state from folks about this or that as it relates to the data, the phasing of our reopening and condition situations in other states, out-of-state quarantines, a whole series of things. So let's go to the data now. We're up over 16,000 total cases since the first case was identified back in early March. Almost 200,000 negative tests. We've really ramped up the testing in our state. The loss of life has leveled off, thank God. Every loss, though, is a precious soul, and our hearts and prayers go out to their families. Hospitalizations continue to go down. Currently, only 32 people are hospitalized, 22 new cases, and 7 critical. And this is a measure of the criticality of the illness in our state and our ability to protect senior citizens and vulnerable populations. 2 criteria that we really look at and that other states around us look at: the 4.4% positive on a 7-day moving average. We want to be better than that. The target for the World Health Organization was 5% positive. We've been down as low as in the 2 to 3% range is where we'd really want to be, and where we have to be under 3% to get into a green scenario for the reopening of our schools. So we really want to lean into that, both by doing more testing and by making sure that folks are abiding by the restrictions, so as the virus is not moving one from the other. 68 new cases per day. Our cutoff, oddly, for the quarantines in New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut is 97, which it's beyond me why we're back on that list, off on the list 1 week, off the next, on the next, which obviously is an indication that that is not a measure that works, particularly for a state like ours. We're solidly under that break point and shouldn't be on that quarantine list. Moving forward to look at the breakdown of cases by county: 7,600 positive cases in Newcastle County, 2,500 in Kent County, and 6,200 in Sussex County. Still to see more cases in Sussex County per 100,000 population. In other words, we got more positive cases in Sussex County than the rest of our state. We really need to lean into that. It's not just a function of the outbreak that we saw in the poultry industry. It's not just a function of what we were seeing in the beach community. So we need to get better compliance in the lower part of our state. And particularly, it's an area where we have 2 school districts in particular that have moved towards a hybrid reopening in Cape Henlopen, and a really fine plan, as I mentioned a week ago. I understand that Seaford School District approved a hybrid mixed plan of in-person and remote learning, and they're making progress in Laurel and Indian River as well, and will continue to focus there, providing support and assistance. Positive cases by age group, you can still see, it's a little difficult to see on this chart, but the line that crosses, that trends upward and then crosses to be the most vulnerable group, or the group with the most cases, is that young adult group, not as vulnerable to the severe illness and to fatalities, but where we're seeing the most cases as a percentage of the population. Really need to get better compliance from that age group. As you look at the 14-day view, again, good positive trends in hospitalizations. The first 2 charts up on the top row, the left and center chart. The far right on the top row is the percent positive. The percentage of tests that we did in a given day or over that 14-day period that were positives. Trending up a little bit, but really basically pretty flat. We've had some good days of late. The new positive cases, you can see, very flat and solidly below that regional quarantine cutoff of 97, both on the 7-day moving average and actually on the day-to-day peaks. No peak in that 14-day trend was over 97, which requires an explanation, I might add. On the 90-day view, you can see the decline from back in May. We're beyond the point of our peak here with our 90-day view. Looking back, we've had ups and downs with respect to hospital admissions in the top middle, and then the percent who tested positive. We did have that peak there in early July after reopening for phase 1, the 1st of July, the July 4th weekend, the partying and activity in the beach communities at that period of time. And then we've new positive cases, bottom row, far left, same kind of peaking there. And then you see the improving conditions since then. And since then, we've flattened out across the state. but just at a level a little bit higher than where we need to be. Certainly where we need to be to get more children back in classrooms, certainly where we need to be to get the level, more importantly, the level of trust among educators, among parents, that children can go safely back into schools for in-person instruction. So a little bit of sacrifice by the rest of us will enable people to go back to work and allow more children to go back to in-person instruction. Here's the big picture of the infection rate, all the available data, persons who tested positive, and you can see going back to the end of April where we saw the peak, a very defined peak, and then a significant decline with the one single uptick there in the beginning of July as we started to reopening in phase one and had, kind of a letdown in the compliance around mask wearing and social distancing in places where folks congregate. We talk a lot about Delaware's personal protective equipment. All the glasses are full, and so we're in a green condition across the board. We are concerned about some of those as we move back to reopening of the schools and the need for additional protective equipment. But right now, everything looks good. Everything I hear on the White House calls, our weekly White House calls from other states, is that they are not seeing shortages as well, although they're expecting them. I mentioned the red, yellow, green scenarios under which school reopening would take place. Right now, we're in the scenario number 2 because we have 2 of the 3 conditions that are yellow. In order to move to full green status, meaning children fully back into classrooms, we need to get one of the other 2, either new cases or percent positives, into the green category. To give you some idea, we readjust this on a weekly basis to give you some idea of what it would take. That percent positive would have to go below 3%, and the 50 new cases would have to significantly improve below 10. And so we've got a way to move to go there in new cases. We're in striking distance with respect to percent positives and would like to get there as soon as possible. I mentioned earlier that Damian DeStefano, who's the director of the Division of Small Business, is with us today. First of all, he and his team have done really tremendous, very difficult work, I might say, in trying to strike that balance between healthy conditions and business establishments, particularly the hospitality industry in our state. They did administer our support program for small businesses a couple months ago in conjunction with the CARES Act funding that came from the federal government. He's going to talk today about our Delaware relief grants, up to $100 million that we're going to use CARES Act funding, $90 million of the state obligation and $10 million from Newcastle County, as I understand the breakdown, to provide assistance mostly for those small businesses who've experienced a significant revenue decline, to enable them to stay in business, frankly, to bring people back to work and to carry on with their business in our state. They'll be available in September, as I said. Damian's going to talk a little bit more about it, and they'll provide relief to cover expenses related to COVID-19 for small businesses. And one of the things that I just want to, before I hand it over to Damian and talk about the grant program, we're really ramping up testing across our state. Many states across the country, testing has gone down. People have kind of lost interest. If they're not symptomatic, they're not thinking that they need to get tested. That's not the case. We know from experience now of the last 5 months that there are a lot of people who test positive, that they're shedding the virus, putting other people at risk, but don't have symptoms themselves. And we've seen that in our state institutions, in the correctional facilities. We've seen that in institutions outside of the state government where there's widespread testing. And we've seen it in the community testing that we've been doing. And so know your status, your COVID-19 status. Don't say, I don't need to get tested because I don't feel sick, nothing's wrong, I don't think I've been exposed. You just never do know. If you go into a situation where you're more exposed to folks that you don't know and maybe at a level that's closer than you otherwise would, get tested. Just go out and get tested. It's easy, it's quick, you get the results back in a couple days, and it gives you really a peace of mind that's worth the effort to get out there and do it. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. A.J. Shaw and his team, in conjunction with Newcastle County, are doing a really good job in making sure we get as many people tested as possible in Delaware. We're going to ramp it up for teachers and staff going back into full in-person learning in schools. We're going to work in conjunction with the University of Delaware State University, bringing students and faculty back on campus. We're going to lean into any outbreaks that we see as we do testing and as we get the experience across our state. So get tested yourself. And by the way, if you are negative, you get tested, you drive that denominator up on our calculation of percent positive, which helps us on all these indices under which we're measured. Damian, tell us about this new grants program that for businesses that have been hurt by COVID-19.
Yes, thank you, Governor, and thanks for recognizing the work of the folks at the Division of Small Business. My team's been working hard over the last few months. We're announcing today, like the Governor mentioned, the DE Relief Grants Program. It is being funded with CARES Act money of up to $100 million, a partnership between the state and Newcastle County. A little bit more about that. The grants that will be available will be pretty significant for qualifying businesses. They'll be eligible to receive up to $100,000 of funding. Will be based on their 2019 federal tax return reported revenue. A percentage of that will equate to the amount of the grant that they can get. Most businesses we expect will be eligible for at least $30,000 of funding, and then, like I said, up to $100,000. We think we'll be able to reach at least 3,000 businesses with the amount of the grant that being where it is and the fund being funded as it is. As we go, we say at least $100 million. We'll keep reevaluating the resources available for that and try to reach more and more businesses because we know the need is there. And then so a little bit about the timeline. Businesses will apply online. That process will open up in early September. And then we're actually going to do 3 rounds of applications, September, October, and November, to make sure that there's time for everybody to learn about the grants. What we saw with some of the federal programs was when they launched all of them at once, there sometimes was a backlog and the information didn't disseminate to all the businesses in the community. So we want to make sure that happens. And then everything will be based at the following website, which we've created, which is delbiz.com/relief. It's live now, and we'll be updating that website daily with new information. The division's going to be hosting a series of webinars over the next few weeks for interested small businesses to learn about what they need to do to be able to apply for the grants. But we want to make sure people know now what they can be doing to prepare for that application process when it does open in early September. We'd recommend gathering up the following documents today: your 2019 tax returns, any receipts for qualifying expenses. The program is based on reimbursement or reimbursement of either expenses incurred due to COVID-19 or planned expenses for COVID-19. One of the things we've been talking with a lot of small businesses about is some of the changes they want to be able to make their places of business safe for customers and the resources that it was required in order to make those changes. And so part of this grant is about making sure they have those resources, can stay afloat, and can do the things they need to do in order to attract more customers. And our regional business managers are going to be available. We have 4 business managers to cover the state. We'll be available to answer questions for folks. But for the time being, we'd recommend signing up for a webinar. There'll be communications coming out of the division over the coming days about those. Learn more, and then reach out if you need assistance and prepare for early September. So I covered a little bit of this, but these are the list of eligible expenditures that you can use a grant for. Purchasing COVID safety equipment, refinancing debt. Many small businesses have had to take on debt during this period to be able to convert that to a grant. Advertising undertaken, and any fixed expenses accrued. This is if you have a rent payment, a lease, or any other kind of fixed expense where your landlord may have let you go 2 months without paying the rent, you'll be able to repay some of those expenses using this grant. And then just want to talk, these programs are still open. We're going to talk a little bit about the customer protection standards here, but the Hospitality Emergency Loan Program, which provides financing to cover fixed expenses like a lease payment, is still open right now through the division. If businesses who do qualify, this one's targeted towards narrow industries, cosmetology and hospitality. But if you qualify, you can still get funding, many cases of at least $10,000 to help pay some of the expenses that you're facing right now. Talk about the customer protection standards. This is a slightly different program. This is aimed at trying to allow both businesses to message to their customers the things that they're doing to create a safe workplace, and also give some assurances to customers when they go out and frequent a business like a restaurant or retail business or a cosmetology business, that they're doing the things that they ought to be doing in order to create a safe space. And the way the program works, it's intended to allow customers to be able to know that without ever actually stepping foot inside the business. So it's a voluntary program. Businesses fill out this checklist, they send it back to us, and the Division of Small Business sends them a window decal free of charge that they can place on their window and let them know that they're in compliance with the customer protection standards. We've been talking to businesses about this program. Many of them like it, find their customers like it, but have been asking us to do more to help spread the word to customers that it is a program, how it's working, that they can feel confident when they see the sticker. And so we're going to be stepping up some of our efforts to do that. We've launched a website with a map of all participating businesses throughout the state that you can sort through as a consumer. That's delbiz.com/protect, and find businesses in your area that are participating in the Customer Protection Standards program. Can sort by the type of business you're looking for. So if you're looking to go out to eat and want to see a business that is following the program, you can find that really easily in your area. And then finally, if you're a business and this is the first time you've been hearing about the program, it's really easy to apply. You can go to that same website. There's information on how to sign up. You fill out the checklist, mail it back to us, and we will mail you a window decal. The whole process typically takes about a week to complete. And then we're trying to recognize the businesses that are participating in the program. So we've been sharing on the division's social media. Our business managers have been going out and finding businesses that are participating, taking pictures, and sharing their efforts on our social media as a way of recognizing those businesses, but also letting customers know, some of the work that these small businesses are doing to try to create safe experiences for them. And this is one example of that. We put this up on our social media last week. The Doggy Playhouse in Newark, Delaware, and the things that they're doing. They are a participant, and as you can see here, the woman who is having a fun time with the dogs under their care is wearing a mask. Their staff is social distancing, providing sanitizing, hand sanitizer for customers, things like that. We're trying to do about 2 to 3 businesses a week on our social media, so any consumers who want to see some of the businesses out there, encourage you to follow us on social media and take a look at that. We'd love to have your engagement on those issues.
Thank you very much, Damian. Love the Doggy Playhouse there. Maybe we get some masks on those dogs. I don't expect they're vulnerable to the virus, but it really is a great program to recognize businesses, establishments that are following the rules. I think it does provide a level of comfort. As you say, we have been hearing from restaurants and other establishments that this is something important, a good housekeeping seal of approval, if you will, customer protection standards, COVID-19 decal on the window. I know myself, when I go into a place, I look around and I either stay in and get something to eat, or turn around and walk out the door, depending on whether I feel comfortable that folks are following the restriction guidelines. Having a program like this, I think, is what business have been asking for, identifying those who have done well, and Jamie Mack has been on with us, identifying businesses. He's also out there, he and his team, doing enforcement as well, so a carrot and the stick kind of approach. That's really important at this point as we try to push those numbers down, get healthier with respect to new positive cases on a day-to-day basis and the percent positive in the testing that we're doing. Next up, we're going to talk about elections. Obviously, we have an unprecedented condition here in Delaware and across the country in the COVID-19 pandemic, nothing that we've experienced in our lifetime. And then in the middle of it, we're having an election, a general election for President of the United States, for a congressional delegation, governor, lieutenant governor, all the way down from the statewide to the local officials. We've had town meetings over the last several months under these conditions. We've had school board meetings. Initially, through the emergency executive order, we took measures that enabled, basically recommended by the local towns to enable them to more effectively and safely do their elections, to do it more remotely with absentee balloting. Legislature came back and passed the vote by mail legislation, and just for this election coming up. I think that's a very important step forward, particularly necessary during a pandemic like the one we're experiencing. Again, to make sure, I start from the proposition that we want to make it easier for people to exercise their right to vote and to do it safely, to not have to think about whether they're going to catch the COVID-19 virus by going out to a polling station, and vote by mail is one way to do it. Other states have been doing it for some time. They have a rolling voting situation. We are a ballot in hand state, which Anthony's going to talk about, which has implications for the counting of those ballots as they come in through the Postal Service. We did have a meeting recently with regional Postal Service managers to get some feel and confidence that they had the mechanisms and the equipment to process the mail on a timely basis, and Anthony's going to share some of that information with you, talk generally about how it works, what the law calls for, and give you some guidance about using vote by mail here in Delaware for the primary coming up in September and the general election in November. Anthony?
Okay. Governor, thank you very much. Thanks for having me here today. I appreciate it. And just want to say thank you for that. And I want to thank our elections team, who is working really hard in these unprecedented times, as everyone is. So again, thank you. As the governor mentioned, we have recently had passed in our General Assembly vote by mail legislation, House Bill 346. The legislature passed that, governor signed it into law. That is a time-limited bill, as governor mentioned. It covers the 2020 state primary and general elections. It will expire in January of 2021. So it's just for this election season. And it is vote by mail, basically, that provides, in addition to absentee voting, which we've traditionally had, we do still have, which is requesting a ballot largely by mail, but for a specific reason. That has not gone away. That still exists. This augments that for this election cycle. So how that works is that, as the governor mentioned, under the auspices of the executive order, earlier in the year for the presidential primary, applications, at that time absentee applications, were mailed to eligible voters for the primary. Again, Delaware is a closed primary state, as we're called, so registered Democrats, registered Republicans vote their respective ballot in the primary, and we've historically been that way. So those applications for the presidential primary were mailed some time ago. As you may recall, the presidential primary was rescheduled a couple times in light of the current situation, ultimately held on July 7th. So what we've done subsequent to that, and in light of the House Bill 346, is that vote by mail applications were mailed to all eligible voters who had not already signed up for absentee. And again, just to reiterate, the main difference, procedurally it's very similar. The main difference is that for vote by mail, no reason is needed other than you wish to vote by that means rather than going to the polling place. I'd like to remind everyone that if you have not received an application already, or if you've received it and not yet returned it, we do have, and it's also indicated in the materials that were mailed, we do have the secure voter portal, ivote.de.gov, which is also a means to sign up for that for your ballot to request. Also, just as a comment, iVote.de.gov is the voter portal in general. It's a means to register to vote, update your voter registration, check your polling place location. You can check your ballot status there, and a whole host of information, find information on elected officials. So it's really a one-stop shop. So we encourage everyone to utilize iVote as a means for information for them throughout the elections year and really any time. Again, just to reiterate this, the vote-by-mail legislation entails mailing an application. The voter still does need to initiate the request for the ballot. Ballots are not mailed automatically. So again, I've mentioned it briefly, but just to reiterate, what is the main difference between absentee voting and voting by mail? Absentee voting, which has existed again for many years and, as I mentioned, still exists in our law, there are specific reasons for which one could request a ballot. Essentially reasons why someone could not appear at their normal polling place on election day. Usually those reasons include people who are sick or disabled, someone could be on vacation, could be in the nature of their business travel, things of that nature. Again, vote by mail, no specific reason required. You just wish to vote by that method versus appearing at your usual polling place. And you are permitted to do that now under the recently enacted legislation. Again, this is just really giving voters another option, expanding their options in how they can cast their ballot, how they can exercise their right to vote. You know, as the governor has mentioned, you know, certainly in light of the current situation, we want everyone to feel safe. We are certainly planning to have, and we are already well underway in getting all of our polling places well staffed. All voters will have that opportunity to vote at their usual polling place. We will have our very dedicated poll workers, election officers out there. We will have a good supply of personal protective equipment, social distancing practices in place. And our poll workers, in addition to all the great work they do administering the election, we've added to their roster of training procedures for example, cleaning and sanitizing voting equipment after each use. Again, maintaining those social distancing guidelines, things of that nature. So again, if someone wishes to report to their usual polling place, they will be welcome to do so. In fact, in the mailings that go out about vote by mail, we actually place on that application specifically for each voter what is your assigned polling place. So again, knowing that you have the right as a voter to vote in person and again, vote by mail, completely optional. So what are some deadlines? Delaware law does allow us to mail ballots out up until 4 days prior to the election day. So the dates are Friday 9/11 or Friday 10/30. A best practice, and you'll see as we've noted on our slide here, best practice is to mail your application back at least 1 week in advance. As the governor mentioned, you know, he and I have recently had conversations with regional postal officials. For many years that I've been in elections, have a very good rapport, and we have a very close working relationship with our regional postal officials. There are, in fact, dedicated election mail specialists in each part of the country. We have a long-standing relationship, as I mentioned. We have someone who's been in that role, who supports Delaware for many, many years, who's a Postal Service veteran, has been in the trenches, knows the operations inside and out. And we have a host of means that we work with the local and regional postal officials to ensure that as many ballots as possible are received. And as the governor mentioned, and I want to highlight, Delaware is a ballot in hand state. So what that means is that our law prescribes that the ballot, the returned ballot, the voted ballot, must be back into the custody of the county elections office that issued the ballot by close of polls. That's 8 p.m. local time. Each state has different requirements as elections are administered locally, and that's been our historical nature in the United States, you know, ever since our inception. Each state, sometimes even each municipality or county within a state may have different regulations. So Delaware is ballot in hand, and I want to make that clear. Unlike other states that may honor a postmark, we don't have the ability to do that. Our state law is very clear that the ballot must be back by 8 p.m., close of polls times, to that county election office. So it's very important, you know, to get that back. And again, we're continuing our relationship, and our communication is ongoing with our regional and local postal officials to ensure we're in sync on that. And I have great confidence, certainly, that that will continue, as has been the case historically. Question comes in, and I mentioned it a few minutes ago, can I send my application in online? Absolutely. In addition to physically returning that postal mailing that we sent you, you can certainly also fax your application back. You can attach it to an email, or again, go to iVote, the voter portal. That's probably the easiest way to do it, the most convenient and the quickest way to do it. And again, as I've said, and I'll stress it again, early, as early as possible. As soon as you get that application, they've been out, the applications for the primaries have been out for a couple weeks now at least. Get that in as soon as possible. Go to iVote today and make your application so we can get that ballot out to you as soon as possible. Question also comes up about requesting for the general and the primary election. The applications that just went out recently do have an option for the primary or the general, or in fact a special election if that were to be the case, if there was a vacancy, for example, in a position, and also the option to choose all elections. So you may very easily on your form or an iVote choose all elections that will opt you in for vote by mail. Another common question, it's good to answer just in case folks may have it. Some people do contact our offices and say, I didn't get a vote by mail application for the primary. Again, Delaware being a closed primary state, if you are not registered a Democrat or Republican, you would not have received one. Again, if you've already signed up for an absentee previously, you also would not have received one. But I always like to reiterate that because sometimes folks don't realize that, or again, every state's rules are different in terms of primary elections. So just wanted to reiterate that. But again, check all the boxes on that form or check the appropriate boxes online at iVote, get yourself signed up, and you'll be all set, and you won't need to do anything in the future. We often get the question as well about vote by mail. Is the process secure? Can I trust the process? The answer is absolutely yes. There are hosts of internal controls that we have in our system. All of the individual applications are reviewed by staff as they are entered. We make sure the information is accurate compared to the voter registration record. If there's ever any questions, experienced supervisors, and we have a lot of folks in elections. We're very fortunate with a great deal of longevity in the department who are very experienced. Anything that would need to be further reviewed is referred to an experienced supervisor. We also have a number of safeguards in the system that absolutely ensures there is only ever one active ballot per voter at any time. So I just want to make sure that folks know that. Sometimes we get that question, isn't it possible to vote more than once? It is not. We have those safeguards in place, and they are very secure and very robust. So let's talk about a deadline. We do have at the end, just a few days from now, we do have the voter registration deadline, which is August 22nd. That is for the state primary on September 15th. Since we're on the topic of deadlines, I'll just throw in very briefly, again, because it's a question we get, and again, it's something that is specific to state laws. We do get some questions about party changes. Delaware law prescribes that the party change period for the state primary actually ended back in May. So that period has been closed since the end of May. May 29th was the last day to submit a party change. Just like to put that out there, because again, that can be a common question. But August 22nd, be sure to register. If you're not registered, iVote.de.gov is the most convenient option. You'll be able to register right up to 11:59 on August 22nd, and those registrations will be honored. Again, vote by mail application, return your application and subsequently your ballot as early as you can. The sooner, the better. Can't stress that enough. Always the prudent thing to do, always the best practice. We do have, under the provisions of the vote by mail legislation, something new, another additional means to return your ballot, which again can help you with timeliness and convenience, is we have vote by mail secure Dropbox locations. The legislation prescribes one in each of the county elections offices, which we have. In addition, for our Newcastle County office, we have, in addition to the office in the Carvel building on the 4th floor, we have a box available in the lobby of the Carvel building, and then has some extended hours since the building is open a little longer, opens early in the morning. We also have a location available at the Newcastle County Warehouse and Training Center 220 Lisa Drive. It's near Harris Corner, near the airport. Especially convenient, more centralized in Newcastle County, especially if folks don't wish to drive into Wilmington. They can certainly do that there. So we are very happy that the General Assembly has provided us and the governor by signature this opportunity to offer vote by mail in addition to our traditional means of voting and the polling place. A lot of folks are taking advantage of it. Just a quick stat, traditionally Delaware has been a 3 to 4% absentee voting state in elections. In our presidential primary that was held July 7th, we had 45% were absentee ballots, so a dramatic increase. And we have made substantial upgrades and changes in our operations to certainly handle the influx of ballots. And we encourage everyone to obviously participate, register to vote, and vote by the means that is best for you and with which you're most comfortable in the current situation. Thank you, Governor.
Anthony, thank you very much for being with us today to talk about a really important issue, a fundamental right of each American, each Delawarean to vote and to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to vote and vote safely this election season during an unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic, following on with the passage of HB 346 that enabled vote by mail balloting in this primary and general election only by that legislation in order that people could feel safe by voting by mail, and that's the purpose of it. So, and your last statistic there that you shared, where our normal absentee balloting was less than 5% in a given election, and in the presidential primary that we had, 45% of the ballots that you received came in as absentee ballots, essentially a vote by mail ballot. And so anticipating, that kind of a change for the primary and general election, just really, really important that folks think about if they're first of all, don't make the decision not to vote because you're afraid of going to a polling place and catching the virus, particularly if you're in that vulnerable population of senior citizens and those that we're trying to protect the most. Vote by mail applications have been sent out. Make sure you avail yourself of that opportunity that the legislature has made available, and do it early so that there is no question about the processing. We are a ballot in hand state. The second thing that we've talked about today is grants for small business assistance, really an important measure, an initiative there that will start in September. Applications in September, if I got that right, Damian. $100 million, really necessary to help businesses that have sacrificed the most as we flatten the curve in our state. Anthony mentioned the de.gov. Again, general information and applications for all this, a great piece of information. And one other thing that we came out with this week that I just want to draw parents' attention to, which is the Dolly Parton Imagination Library expansion statewide. So if you have children under the age of 5, we're giving out books through Dolly Parton and her Imagination Library to these children to start them off on the right foot. Really important in these times of COVID-19 as we're trying to get material and instructional material into the hands of all our children. And this is a really neat program, frankly, that Tracy and I have been working on, and with Dolly Parton, who's by the way, just a wonderful spokesperson and a real precious jewel for all of us. So with that, I want to thank everybody for paying attention today, for tuning in, for the media for attending. Remember our rules in terms of acting with a sense of community. Be smart, get tested, appropriate washing of the hands and face covering, social distancing. So we have questions from the press that's here. Thank you again for coming, and we have some pre-submitted questions as well.
How are you, Governor?
I'm good. I didn't recognize you there with your mask on.
My questions are for the Election Commissioner.
Sure.
First of all, there are a lot of people, which I think you touched on a little bit, there are a lot of people who are getting increasingly concerned about the mail-in process because of what's going on in the news. If someone has requested and has received a mail-in ballot and they've changed their mind, they want to go vote in person, or they don't want to send it in the mail just because of concerns they have about the system, what can they do?
Sure, absolutely. That's a good question. If someone has requested a ballot and they have not yet returned it, our systems, specifically our poll books, we have electronic poll books, which are secure tablets at each polling place where check in the voters. They are loaded with the status on absentee and also vote by mail ballots. And we have the ability to update that pretty close to real time. So if someone has requested a ballot and then they've changed their mind, they can show up at their assigned polling place. The poll workers are trained to contact the county elections office. What they will do is then verify the information, and that absentee or vote by mail ballot will be voided, and then the voter will be allowed to vote in the polling place. Again, that goes back to that system of keeping only one active ballot at any one time. If the ballot has already been returned, if someone had mailed it, say they mailed it late, it was in fact received, say on election day, early in the day, the voter goes in later in the day to vote, then in that case they wouldn't be allowed to vote. Again, going back to that one active voter. But one active vote per voter, excuse me. But there are those systems in place in case a voter changes their mind or they wish to exercise a right in person.
Okay, I have one more question. The Delaware GOP just announced this afternoon that they are suing the state, the elections department, and you over the universal mail-in legislation that the General Assembly passed in June. They are suing it over their argument that it is unconstitutional and, quote, threatens the integrity of election results with problems arising from untimely delivery of mail and ballots being rejected for non-compliance with the required standards. Are you aware of this lawsuit, and do you have a response?
Just heard about it. Of course, any current legislation wouldn't be able to comment on that.
Okay, thank you.
Jake Owens,
Hey,
Delaware
Jake.
Time. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you. Thank you for being here again.
Excited to hear about the new DE relief program. I was hoping to get an update from Damian on the last one, though. So I'm wondering about the HELP grant program. Have we completed the backlog of applicants on that, and how many have we processed so far?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking, Jake. So we have now processed, I believe, we can get you the exact number, but it's over 300 and over $5 million has been sent out. There is no more backlog. We've cleared out the backlog. Now we're getting new applications, though not at the volume we were in April and May, probably five to 10 a week. And it's taken us between 10 and 14 days to process those, so right where we want to be. And we've got a lot of people who are on their 4th or 5th month of receiving the loans, which when we launched it, I don't know that we knew how long it would go on, but I think it's been helpful to those that have gotten it.
I know one of the things about the PPP program was folks ran through that money, and we're hoping to get a second round of that. For the HELP program, are you eligible for a second round of funding if you already received a HELP grant?
If you already received a help loan?
Yeah.
So it's monthly. So we have people who have come back and received several months of the help loans. When we launched the program, we didn't know how long it would be needed. And so we didn't want people to take out more debt than they might have needed. And so we created the mechanism that they apply each month. Once you have gotten through that initial clearance, it becomes very easy to get the next month's. But we don't have a limit on the number of months that you can receive a help loan.
And under the DE relief program, it will be possible to double dip on both the HELP program and the DE relief program. Is that correct?
It will. We're looking at, we may require some guarantees on the loan payment if you receive a grant and don't use it to pay off the help loan, so that we have assurances that you will pay off the help loan in the future. But we will be able to, we're not going to be disqualifying people because they received a help loan from receiving a grant.
Gotcha. In a different subject, Governor, we've obviously got some national attention in town for Wilmington and Delaware. That was a little bit unexpected with the DNC here this week. Just wondering if you have a message for people watching around the country this week. I know the DNC kind of prescribes what you can say, but here you can say what you want. I'm wondering, is there a message? How do we capitalize on that attention for some future gain?
Well, I would just say to my fellow Democrats and others who tuned into the to the DNC virtual convention. You saw great things on the television about the state of Delaware. Come visit. Come visit and enjoy our beaches. Come visit it and enjoy our outdoor spaces. Come visit and enjoy our historical places. Come visit our state. Come if you're a worker and you're looking for a really good place to live that's close to major metropolitan areas, got a great quality of life, low cost of living, some place to set down your roots, come and move to Delaware. It's a great place to be. It has been a really great opportunity to showcase our state, obviously our favorite son, Joe Biden, who's been such a foundation of our politics for the last half century, and now the Democratic nominee to be president of the United States. Really, it's a proud moment, I think, certainly for all of us, for me as a former staffer, coming full circle last night and being able to vote to announce the votes of Delaware's delegates to our Delaware favorite son, and hopefully the next president of the United States.
And just lastly, we talked a bit about where we are with coronavirus, obviously, earlier on. Considering that hospitalizations continue to remain low, is there any guidance or any thinking on your behalf on when we can maybe expect phase 3? Is there a metric you're looking for outside of hospitalization?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, one that I answered, I think, a week or so ago, that we continue to look at that question, and we know so much more now than we did 2 or 3 months ago when the CDC came down with its phasing approach, if you remember, 14 days of continuous improvement before you move to the next phase. And one of the troubling parts about where we are is we've been relatively flat, getting better for sure, but relatively flat for since mid-July. And so our focus now is on creating confidence among parents and teachers and staff that we can send our children back to school safely. And to do that, we need a new normal that has restrictions to movement and to gatherings, and that negatively affect certain business establishments, but are necessary for getting better and getting healthier. So we're trying to strike that balance, working with our Division of Small Business, working with the industry groups to figure out, are there interim steps that we can look at. I know one of them is that we're looking at is bar seating. The issue really is when people congregate at the bar, not so much when they're sitting facing forward, and just trying to think through all those things. At the end of the day, though, it comes down to compliance. And we're seeing now, I just report on the radio this morning about Notre Dame University. They brought all the students back, and the students were having off-campus parties, and they had this outbreak, not dissimilar to what we saw at the beach communities, and now they're closing down the university. I don't know what we have to do to get the message across that we can control that destiny if we just follow simple rules and understand that this virus is tricky, and it's still out there and can invade our communities in ways that we won't anticipate, but we know where the vulnerabilities are. And so to your question, that's what we're really focusing on. I think we're positioned to do it in a smarter way. We will be looking at ways, we want those businesses to get back to business and to get revenue, and particularly restaurants. My heart goes out to those folks because they've really sacrificed the most over the last 5 months, because those areas where people congregate in close quarters, and in those cases with alcohol, where people start not to be thinking about what specific restrictions, it's the experience of across the country has been that's where outbreaks have come. And it doesn't matter, Democrat, Republican governor, here in the mid-Atlantic states, in the Southeast and Florida, Texas, they close bars and restaurants because they know, and that's where the evidence is that that's so much where it is. So we got to find a better way, and the better way is for people to not be complacent, and for people. That's why the stickers. That's why, we heard early on. We saw in Ocean City, so many of the bars and restaurants closed themselves down. because they couldn't control what folks were doing. And so it's a big challenge. I don't want to feel like preachy about it, but it's in everybody's self-interest. And certainly the interest of our business community, which is so important to our way of life and everything that's important to us, that we have a strong economy. And we got to have both, economy and a strong, healthy community.
The first question's from Jeff Balk at Radio Rehoboth. Do you know why we were added back to the New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut quarantine list? What is your response to that?
Yeah, I said a few weeks ago when we were on the first time that I'm mad as hell. And then we're off, and I was happy. Then we're back on, and I'm mad as hell again. And then we're off. That just doesn't make any sense. And it's a distraction. I've called my colleagues in the other states, and I just can't, we're just not able to get through. They're not using the data that we see. We present it every week up here. And what we suspect, we have asked time and again for the formula that used to keep us off the list. We know what our break point is, 97. We know we're not even close to the percent positive, which is 10%. We're well under 4% or 5% and going lower. All our criteria are better. Hospitalizations. I'd like to compare our hospitalizations to theirs. What they're doing, the only thing we can assume is they're taking cumulative cases from week to week. And because of kind of data entry issues, they calculate that we're over that limit, and we just aren't. So I'm going to continue my intervention there, trying to get the attention, and we need to just continue to get better, and then we won't be there. What's frustrating is when we do get better, and we end up on the list because of a data glitch, which is just unacceptable.
The next question's from Melissa Steele at Cape Gazette. With Dell State students going back to campus and UD kids moving into off-campus housing in Newark, is there any way to report COVID breakouts for those areas? If not, in an effort to not penalize the rest of the state?
Yeah, we've shown that we were willing and able to do that when we had different restrictions on bars and restaurants in certain zip codes along the beach communities when we had the outbreak there. And so we do have, first of all, we have really good relationships with Mayor Clifton in Newark and his team, with Dr. Asanis and his team at the University of Delaware, and working closely with them. And Damian's working with the business establishments there. I mean, the really fundamental question is, do you close establishments or have tighter restrictions and push and force students off into off-campus parties, like the ones I just referenced that were the source of the problem at University of Notre Dame? I think that's an unintended consequences that you don't want. And we've had that conversation with the mayor, and he's conscious of it as well. And he does have restrictions that are tighter than ours with respect to off-campus gatherings and the like. I mean, that's where the problem is with these big parties where lots of young adults drinking and carrying on and not paying any attention to the fact that we've got a COVID-19 virus loose, and it started in Newark, by the way. So yes, we can do that, and we will look at doing that if need be.
All right, we have time for two more questions. This one's from Tim Furlong at NBC 10. Are you satisfied with the progress Delaware school districts are making? Do you wish there was more consistency with the plans across our state and our region? And have you been watching the Catholic and private school plans? Do you think their models stand a chance of succeeding?
Yeah, first of all, the objective is really to create a level of confidence and trust in parents and families and teachers and staff, so that we can get more consistent application of the hybrid model across our state. I've said from the beginning that those decisions needed to be made at the local district level, because only they understood very clearly the limitations that they had with their buildings, with their student populations, with the support from the community. And we've seen some very good and strong hybrid models. I mentioned Cape Henlopen, and a really good one, Seaford. Many of the other districts and high schools have have identified hybrid. The rest of the districts that opted to go remote initially will learn from that. They'll learn from the private and Catholic schools that have stronger in-person instruction hybrid models. And I have talked both to the Catholic School Network, individual schools. I've seen what they're planning to do. Their situations tend to be a little different. They have fewer children and greater ability to spread them out. I think we will learn from those private and schools, charter schools. Some are remote fully and some are not. As I said, would I prefer there were more consistency? I guess, but I realize that there are differences at the local level, at the building level, and with respect to support from parents of the children. Even in the Catholic schools, the parents are given the option of having their children come in remote or in-person instruction. And so I think that's an important component of each of the models, and each of the models that I'm aware of have that as part of it. We'll continue to work with the districts through the Department of Education and the Division of Public Health to really address the comfort level and the trust and confidence that it can be done safely. We believe that it can. There are examples of outbreaks in schools across the country that people point to, well, what about this or what about that? And we need to demonstrate that we recognize that, but we think that children are better off in classrooms in a protected kind of way, in a balanced kind of way, like some of the districts that have plans that do that. So it'll be a process through the fall. And by the way, the most important thing is to get healthier, for every Delawarean to follow the guidelines, to be smart, to get tested, to think about the need to get children back in classrooms, to think about enabling businesses to get more reopened and folks to go back to work so that they can support their families. At some level, it's all connected, and it comes back to a sense of community. It comes back to following the guidelines and restrictions. Pretty simple things like wearing a mask. And I see more and more people that get it and realize that it's not just, it's more that they're protecting other people than themselves. And so we do. We still have a lot of work to do, and so do the school districts.
All right, last question from Sophia Schmidt at Delaware Public Media. Currently, the Department of Elections can mail vote-by-mail ballots out to voters as little as 4 days before the election. The Postal Service is advising states to tell voters their mail-in ballots, to mail the mail-in ballots back at least a week before Election Day. How do you plan to resolve this discrepancy?
Yeah, so that is an issue. I should probably let Anthony take care of that since he is the elections commissioner.
No problem. Thank you, Governor. Basically, as I mentioned earlier, we just encourage everyone to return as early as possible. I think in the presentation, we put 7 days as a best practice. Just as a side note on that, again, elections varying state to state. Some states have administrative authority, the elections officials do. In Delaware, a lot of our requirements are prescribed by code. So the 4-day mailing, where we can mail it up to 4 days before the election, is in the code. So that's one of those things, probably in light of the Postal Service going into the future, we'll have to look at asking the legislature to take a look at that and possibly change that if that's their desire to do so.
Thank you, Anthony. And related to that question, as governor, I would like to say again, or reiterate again, that House Bill 346, vote by mail, was passed by the legislature in a bipartisan vote in the Senate, more of a party line vote in the House. And the reason that it was passed was so that we could encourage people to vote and to vote safely in the context of a COVID-19 pandemic. Already we've seen in the presidential primary that nearly 50% of the ballots were cast by vote by mail. And so if we're going to provide the confidence level for people to vote in this election, then vote by mail, absentee voting is a very important part of that. And that's the context of talking about it today in the context of our COVID-19 press conference. And so with that, I want to thank everybody again for joining us this week. Thank you for your attention. If you're in a small business, make sure you look into our new small business assistance program. There'll be more on that. If you're a parent with a child under 5 years of age, look at the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. And if you have questions about our elections, it's ivote.de.gov, ivote.de.gov. Thank you very much.